It all starts with the end of the world, where humanity's greatest forces were wiped out by invaders. In the middle of a desolate battlefield, two survivors look at the destruction around them. This is Xenon Glorious, a sacred swordsman who wonders if they are the only ones left. By his side is the 9-star mage Coven, who confirms that everyone else has fallen. Not even the prophetess Liliana or the summoner Galahad stood a chance against the enemies. With that, the swordsman asks the mage to focus on supporting him, and she questions his plan. He then raises his sword with determination and replies that it is obvious what he is going to do. His goal is to land a single strike on that giant monster in red armor. But his companion tries to stop him, saying that not even everyone together could defeat the beast. Ignoring the warning, Xenon charges forward with everything he has, releasing a powerful golden aura from his body. His eyes shine intensely as he channels an absurd amount of energy into his sword. The mage is surprised by such power and realizes that her partner has not given up on the fight yet. Then the protagonist flies toward the giant enemy, looking like a ray of golden light. The giant monster simply raises its hand, which glows with a sinister red energy. At that moment, the hero is caught by this energy and begins to feel an overwhelming pressure. Even so, he does not give up and keeps pushing his attack with all the strength he has left. The clash between the two powers creates an impressive scene as Xenon tries to pierce the defense. Feeling that he won't be able to do it alone, the young man calls out his partner's name, asking for help. The mage promptly replies that he can leave it to her and begins to cast a support spell. A green energy surrounds the swordsman, further strengthening his powerful attack. With his partner's support, the protagonist's strike finally begins to overcome the enemy. The red armored monster is pushed back for the first time in the battle. Xenon then lets out a battle cry, putting every drop of his strength into the final attack. A gigantic explosion happens when the two energies clash with full force. The girl with purple hair is shocked by the incredible power of that combined technique. However, when the smoke clears, the enemy is still standing and seems to not have taken any damage. The protagonist refuses to accept this and shouts that it is not over yet. But the effort is too much for his body, and he begins to feel the side effects. Seeing this, his companion desperately warns him that his body will not hold up much longer. The swordsman ignores her and keeps pushing his limits, even knowing the consequences. Suddenly, the mage seems to have an idea, and her expression changes completely. She holds her staff firmly as she prepares to take drastic action. Next, the girl uses a binding spell on Xenon, who doesn't understand what is happening. She then reveals that he is the world's last hope, and she cannot let him go like this. The young man shouts that if they do not defeat that guy now, everyone will be wiped out anyway. The mage replies that this is why she is entrusting everything to him, as she believes in his potential. Then she reveals an old pocket watch, which is a magical tool from her family. The enemy prepares to attack again, and the girl says there is no time for explanations. She makes the swordsman promise that next time he will not let those villains win. The watch begins to glow, and she asks him to do it for everyone who is lost, while the young man shouts in confusion. Illa says that the world is in his hands as the hero yells for her to let him go. But the red monster prepares to attack the mage, who sacrifices herself for her companion. With tears in her eyes, she says goodbye to Xenon, who watches helplessly. Then a great blue light emerges from the ground, enveloping the swordsman. The enemy's attack rapidly approaches the girl with purple hair. The pocket watch she used falls to the ground and begins to break. The magical artifact lies there in the middle of the destruction while the magic takes place. The mage falls to the ground, heavily injured but satisfied with her plan. She then whispers that her plan was a success and seems relieved. That watch is a divine item with the power to change the world through reincarnation. With this, Xena would return to the past in a different body to change reality. The mage hopes he can change the world as she is hit by the attack. The enemy's power completely consumes her, and she cries out. In her final thought, she hopes that next time she can win his heart. Suddenly, the protagonist wakes up confused in front of a mansion and calls out for his partner. Feeling a headache, he realizes he is in a luxurious room. The young man looks around and wonders if he is in a noble's house because of her magic. He questions what exactly happened to him. At that moment, a maid enters the room and asks if he is okay. The hero asks for a weapon to fight the invaders, but the maid doesn't understand anything. The young woman calls him Master No, and he is confused, not recognizing the name or the girl. The swordsman then looks at his own hands strangely. Shocked, he realizes that this body is not his. Then he wonders if he has possessed someone else's body. Desperate, the young man asks the maid where he is and who he is. The girl thinks he is acting weird because of a fever. The protagonist grabs her and demands that she answer his questions. She explains that he is no Dasker, the fourth son of the family, and he asks what year it is. The maid replies that they are in the year 850. With this, he understands that he reincarnated 10 years before the battle against the invaders. And to make matters worse, he is in the Dasker family, a house of wicked magic swordsmen. Suddenly, another voice calls her by the name of Selena. A second maid appears, bringing his medicine. She says it is his usual medicine prepared by Master Scar for his health. The protagonist stays silent and stares at the bowl suspiciously. His eyes glow and he realizes there is something wrong with the drink. Then the young man throws the bowl to the floor, breaking it into several pieces. Right after, 3 men appear and greet him strangely. The man with long hair says they heard a noise and came to see what it was, but the smile on his face shows he has other intentions. The man with long hair says it is a waste to throw away Master Scar's goodwill. The protagonist mocks the medicine, and the man threatens him for insulting the master. He then challenges them to drink it, since it is a poison. The power of his sacred core repels unholy forces, which is why he noticed the drink was poisonous. With a serious look, the group's leader says they will force him to drink it. The young man with black hair smiles as their masks have finally fallen. He says they must be his guard dogs, and that he actually wanted to get used to his new body. With a confident smile, the young man warns that he is going to play with them a little. Out of patience, the leader orders his men to restrain him. The two henchmen promptly advance to carry out their boss's order, but the hero is faster and dodges the first attack with ease. Then he lands a powerful punch on one of the henchmen's faces. The strike throws him hard against the wall while he cries out in pain. The second henchman tries a side attack, but the protagonist dodges agilely. Right after, he lands a precise blow on the other enemy's chin. Despite this, the young man realizes he didn't knock them out as he expected. This just shows how weak this body is, and he wonders why he was poisoned. The group's leader doesn't care if he gets hurt and tells his men to finish the job. Suddenly, a skill window appears right in front of his eyes. The men warn him to give up if he doesn't want to get hurt even more. He realizes it is an appraisal skill that shows the enemy's statuses. The young man is surprised to have such a rare skill. He then assumes that the original body already possessed this skill, and that they are just recruits. Taking advantage of the enemy's distraction, the protagonist charges forward with speed. One of the men tries to react but is too late. The young man hits him with a powerful kick that knocks him out instantly. Then he grabs the sword of one of the fallen henchmen. The last enemy tries to attack him with his own sword, but the protagonist blocks the strike with ease. Then he breaks the opponent's sword and disarms him completely. The maids watch in shock at their master's sudden strength. The group's leader comments that even sick, he is still a Daskor, and the young man challenges him. With an annoyed look, the young man is intrigued by what just happened. At that moment, a purple energy starts coming out of his body, and he feels a demonic core. This core is the root of the exclusive power of the Daskor family swordsman. In contrast, his former glorious family possessed the sacred core. Naturally, these two opposing forces shouldn't coexist in a single body. The group's leader says the demonic power has finally started to get out of control. He reveals that the medicine was a poison meant to dangerously amplify his demonic core. With the combat, the demonic energy became uncontrollable and is now consuming his body. Even though he has never tried it before, he has a plan. He then decides to use the power of his sacred core to suppress the demonic energy. The enemy with long hair calls it a useless struggle and prepares to attack. Using his first form, he creates a wave of red energy and charges forward. But the protagonist manages to react in time and prepares to block the strike. Their two swords clash, creating a large amount of sparks. The man is surprised that he reacted and that he can use techniques with the demonic core. In anger, the enemy tells the young man to know his place and calls him trash. The hero stays focused and faces his opponent with a serious look. Then he uses the sacred energy to unleash a powerful spinning strike. His opponent uses his own dark energy to defend against the attack. The clash between light and darkness creates an impressive scene. The man with long hair is pushed back by the force of the protagonist's strike. Even so, the young man keeps pressing his attack with everything he has. Agilely, he jumps to dodge the enemy's technique and find an opening. This exchange of blows gave him a good idea of the enemy's limits and techniques. The opponent then asks where all his earlier courage went. The young man with black hair replies that the enemy is the one starting to panic. Annoyed, the enemy calls him an insolent brat and goes on the attack again. He then shouts that the hero will never be able to read his technique. The entire room is covered by a red mist as he moves. The protagonist stands perfectly still in the center, waiting for the right moment to act. With his eyes glowing intensely, he can sense his enemy's presence. The young man finds him and delivers a precise strike in his direction. The attack hits dead on and creates a small explosion on the spot. The man falls to the floor injured and wondering how he did it. The protagonist explains that the enemy put too much faith in his own technique. The defeated enemy is shocked and questions what that power was. The young man replies that not even he completely understands what happened. He felt the power of his sacred core intertwining with the demonic core. It was a combination of his original power with that of the original owner of this body. If he can master this power, maybe he can save the world once more. Thinking of his old partner, he gives thanks for having found a ray of hope. The two maids run up to him worried and ask if he is hurt. The young man says he is fine and points to something at the window. A small black dragon is perched there holding a letter in its mouth. One of the maids explains that it is a summons from the current patriarch, Lord Victor. The letter says he wishes to confirm his intention to participate in the succession war. The protagonist reads the letter, confused about what this war might be. He then asks the two maids if they know anything about it. The maid then explains that anyone who serves the Daskor family knows about it. She goes on to say that it is a conflict to strengthen the family in a battle for demonic cores. In this war, siblings fight each other, and the winner claims the loser's core. The protagonist thinks there was no information about them because they eliminated each other in this war. The young woman then asks if he really intends to participate in the family's succession. With a confident smile, the young man replies that she will find out soon. He remembers his former glorious family, which was seen as a symbol of justice. But the Dasker family is the exact opposite, being a symbol of disgust and fear. Everyone knows that the current patriarch Victor Dasker is humanity's strongest swordsman. The young man then prepares to enter a large room to see everything with his own eyes. With a determined look, he is ready to face whatever comes his way. As he passes through the door, he is announced as Noah Dasker. The young man enters the hall and sees several people waiting for him. He then realizes that these people are his new and dangerous family. The first one he sees is the eldest son, Damien Dasker. By his side is the eldest daughter, named Julia Dasker. Next, he notices the presence of the second son, Cease Dasker, and also the family's second daughter, Eve Dasker. But suddenly his eyes fix on one person in particular. That is Scar Dasker, the third son and the scoundrel who poisoned him. Julia comments on the rumors of his recovery, and the young man confirms that he found the cause. She asks if he is going to recover, but the young man says he will dedicate himself to sword training. His older sister stares at him with a calculating and suspicious look. Scar provokes him, saying that a weakling like him shouldn't waste time training. The protagonist replies that a coward who won't face him should shut up. Annoyed by the response, his brother calls him an arrogant little punk. Eve then interrupts the fight and tells them both to be quiet. At that moment, someone announces that Lord Victor has arrived. The footsteps of a powerful person echo throughout the hall. The older siblings immediately bow as a sign of respect. The other children do the same, showing fear and reverence. The protagonist feels an overwhelming presence coming from the man. He thinks that this swordsman was so famous that he didn't even know his name in his past life. Sitting on his throne is Victor Dasker, the family's 9-star patriarch. The man says it seems everyone is present for the meeting. He then announces that the summoning council is going to begin. The patriarch addresses no, saying the meeting is to confirm his intentions. Victor asks what he intends to do now that he has overcome his illness. The young man gives a slight smile before giving his answer. He declares that he will win the succession fight and stand at the top of the Dasker family. The patriarch then asks him if he is prepared for a declaration of war. But the protagonist replies that his father is incorrect, leaving the man confused. He then states that it is a declaration of war against everyone who is there. His older siblings stare at him with a serious and surprised expression. The other children also don't seem to believe what they just heard. The young man says his father is also one of the opponents he needs to defeat. With a defiant smile, he makes it clear that he will not back down. Suddenly, an overwhelming purple energy comes out of the patriarch and heads toward his son. The young man is hit dead on by the pressure and feels his father's power. The floor of the hall begins to crack with the intensity of that aura. Even with difficulty, he recognizes that is Victor's demonic core. The man asks if he dares to surpass his power and looks at him with contempt. Without hesitating, the protagonist answers yes and maintains his firm posture. Then the patriarch wants to know why he seeks power so much. The young man replies that it is so nothing can ever be stolen from him again. Surprisingly, the white-haired man gives a satisfied smile. He says he liked the answer and that it is an admirable trait for a family member. With this, Victor announces that Noah will participate in the fight, and anyone against it should speak up. The other children stare at him with looks that mix anger, envy, and contempt. The father then yells for his son to become hungry for strength. Sometime later, we see the Dasker family mansion again. The protagonist is training and lands a strike on a scarecrow. He cuts the training dummy in half, showing that he is progressing. His physical condition has improved, but he is still at a minimum level for fighting. Furthermore, he cannot fight like before because of the two mixed cores. The young man looks at his hand and wonders what this power is. He decides that for now, it is better if no one knows about his sacred core. His sister Julia appears and comments that his movements are good for someone who is sick. She explains that now he is also one of their father's favorites. The girl says she wanted to see for herself, and the young man gets the message. Wasting no time, she grabs a wooden sword and prepares to fight. She charges with everything she has, and the young man is surprised by the sudden attack. He is hit by a powerful kick and thrown backward. His sister then asks if he thought she was just there to talk. The protagonist gets annoyed by the silver-haired girl's attitude. She attacks again with a series of quick and precise strikes. He faces her and thinks it is perfect for testing how far he can fight. Julia unleashes a sequence of attacks that the young man has a hard time defending. She hits him with a powerful kick that completely knocks him off balance. The older sister says he has talent but is still far from satisfactory. His older sister questions if this is really the level of someone recognized by their father. Using his skill, the young man confirms that she is strong and has already reached the 7-star mastery. The silver-haired girl says it was disappointing and advances with impressive speed. The protagonist is surprised by the quickness, but manages to defend against the strike in time. At that moment, the energy of the two cores begins to leak and envelop the wooden sword. The two then exchange blows as their auras of power clash violently. The young man realizes that the power of his sacred and demonic core is leaking and tenses up. The combination of the two energies creates an incredible visual effect during the combat. Julia recognizes the power as the sacred demonic core, which they said was a flaw. She says she heard his core was weak since birth, and the young man becomes thoughtful. He understands that the original body already had this core, and it seemed like a flaw because he didn't know how to use it. The young man then realizes he will have no problem fighting seriously, since no one knows about the sacred core. With a smile, he says he will show if it really is a flaw, and his sister notes his amusement. The protagonist then goes on the attack, using all the power of his combined core. The silver-haired girl dodges the strike and calls him for a serious talk. She asks the purpose of the succession fight, and he replies that it is to create the strongest. His sister then says this saves time and throws away her training sword. With a sinister red aura, she releases her power and asks for his demonic core. The young man is shocked by the sudden change in attitude and his sister's power. He then yells for the maid Selena to bring him his real sword. The young woman promptly throws the sword to her master, who prepares for battle. The black-haired young man charges at his sister, who is also coming toward him. The clash between the two powers creates an explosion, and the protagonist feels the pressure. He tries his hardest to hold back his opponent's powerful attack. The silver-haired girl keeps pushing her brother back with incredible force. Using the base of his sword, he narrowly manages to block a strike to the head. Julia smiles and comments that he has improved more than she expected. Excited by the fight, she asks him to show even more of his power. She then jumps back and challenges him to withstand her next attack. His sister prepares to use the first form of her style, the dark flame sword dance. Seeing that the attack is dangerous, the young man decides to block it with everything he has. The silver-haired girl launches a wave of red energy in her brother's direction. The two attacks clash, creating a massive impact and lots of sparks. The shockwave from the collision of powers spreads across the entire training field. Julia then asks if he intends to keep fighting with just one hand. She challenges him to use brute force to make her use two hands as well. The protagonist then holds his sword with two hands, getting ready for a new attack. He delivers a powerful downward strike with all his strength. Surprised by the force, the girl is forced to defend herself using two hands. The black-haired young man smiles in satisfaction, having finally made her fight seriously. The silver-haired girl attacks him with everything, and the protagonist is thrown back by the force. He grits his teeth and tries his hardest to withstand the pressure of her strike. The impact of the attack drags him across the ground, kicking up a large amount of dust. His sister watches him with a serious look and a sinister red aura around her. The young man realizes that using the power of the sacred, demonic core with everything was barely enough. He then understands that what just happened with his power has a meaning. The black-haired young man realizes that was the limit of his sacred demonic core. His sister then asks if he knows why they don't eliminate each other immediately. She explains that the stronger a demonic core becomes, the slower its growth is. Because of this, it is useless to harvest a demonic core before it grows to a certain point. But she says he managed to block and even counterattack her strike. The silver-haired girl says that if his core is at this level, it might be worth stealing. The protagonist gets annoyed by the threat and his sister's intention. Wasting no time, she prepares to use the eighth form of her fighting style. Suddenly, a voice shouts that this is enough, and a sword flies between the two. The man the protagonist had defeated earlier appears and blocks the girl's attack. He yells for her to stop, because if she continues, Master Noah will perish. The girl tells him to stay out of it, as it is a fight to steal cores, and he gets confused. But the older sister doesn't believe it and says it is impossible because he blocked her attack. The black-haired young man is panting and seems to have reached his limit. The bodyguard then explains that his master's demonic core has already exhausted its power. The girl thinks that if it were a 4- or 5-star core, the limit wouldn't arrive so quickly. The protagonist remains on the ground, trying to recover from the effort. She then puts away her sword and says it seems to have been a misunderstanding on her part. But the girl warns him to remember that she really wants his demonic core. She says that when he gets stronger, they will fight seriously until the end. With a confident smile, the young man replies that he will look forward to it. As she walks away, the silver-haired girl thinks there is something strange about his power. She remembers that that strike is not something that can be stopped with the power of a 2-star. With this, the older sister is certain that he is hiding something. The girl then gives a slight, mysterious smile as she continues on her way. She then whispers that she prays he grows in an interesting way. Elsewhere, someone yells in anger at the latest events. The long-haired man the protagonist defeated is crying in frustration. Scar is furious that a weakling like Noah was allowed into the succession fight. He screams in anger and wonders why he never heard anything like this before. The older brother cannot accept what happened, and the bodyguard tries to say something. The man with long hair then whispers a report to his master. With an evil smile, Scar says it is fine because he just thought of something interesting. He then promises that he will drag Noah off the stage of the succession fight. The bodyguard introduces himself as Kyle, Noah's new instructor. He explains that Lord Victor would find it boring if he were eliminated so early from the fight. Using his skill, the young man analyzes his new instructor. He confirms that the man's skills are more than enough for the job. Kyle says they could start training, but he has other orders. He then hands over a letter with a red seal from Lord Victor. The order is to investigate and eliminate the miasma pool in the region. The miasma pool is a dangerous phenomenon where monsters become stronger and more aggressive. The protagonist gives a slight smile at the new mission he received. He realizes he can use this situation to his advantage somehow. In a nearby forest, Kyle fights against a giant monster spider. The instructor orders his men to keep up the pace and take down all the monsters. One of the men tears out the fang from one of the spiders they defeated. The guards whisper about the protagonist being scared because he is only a 2-star. Kyle thinks they should hurry and wonders what Victor saw in that young man. Suddenly they hear a scream and wonder what is happening. They then find several children passed out on the forest floor. The protagonist asks if they are unconscious and Kyle questions what they should do. The instructor says resolving the miasma pool is urgent and decides to take them along. The group then carries the children and continues on their way through the forest. Suddenly a dense purple mist begins to appear in the sky. The mist becomes darker and more sinister as they advance. The protagonist realizes that the concentration of miasma is increasing. Suddenly, a giant monster leaps from the trees toward them. Someone yells that it is a scorpion and that the situation is very bad. The monster attacks the group and Kyle yells to get the children to safety. He explains that with the miasma's influence, the monster must be equivalent to an A rank. The giant beast prepares to attack with its powerful stinger. With a shout, the protagonist warns that the monster is coming. The scorpion attacks with its stinger and throws all the guards away. One of the men comments on the incredible power and speed of the monster. Another guard yells that the attack is dangerous and that the young master will be wiped out. But surprisingly, the protagonist manages to cut off the monster's tail. He then charges forward with his sword, glowing with the energy of the two cores. The young man leaps toward the scorpion to deliver a final strike. He manages to defeat the monster with a single powerful blow. Kyle is shocked that he repelled the attack, and the instructor yells that it isn't over. The scorpion's body begins to release a large amount of green poison. The poison spreads through the air, and the protagonist uses his energy to protect himself. Even so, a drop of the poison still manages to hit the monster's stinger. The monster attacks with a red beam, and the protagonist defends himself with his energy. With a determined look, he holds back the giant beast's powerful attack. The young man then deflects the monster's energy, which hits the forest to the side. The guards are impressed and comment on his exceptional swordsmanship. Suddenly, the scorpion's stinger begins to regenerate and prepares to attack. The monster launches a new attack with poison, and the young man gets ready to defend. He manages to block the poison with his sword, using the energy of the two cores. The young man struggles to hold back the attack while energy envelopes his hands. He is pushed back by the force of the strike but does not give up. The clash between the sword and the poison creates an impressive scene. The energy of his combined core protects the blade from the corrosive poison. The protagonist admits that the situation is difficult and that he is at his limit. Kyle wonders how he acquired such swordsmanship without having a guide. The young man then calls out to his instructor, asking for help in the battle. He asks Kyle to create an opening and the man readily agrees. The scorpion turns and attacks the instructor with its regenerated stinger. With a battle cry, the man prepares to block the monster's attack. He manages to defend the strike, creating the distraction his master asked for. The young man praises his instructor, saying he is impressive as expected. Taking advantage of the chance, he runs up the back of the giant monster. He uses the energy in his feet to secure himself on the beast's hard shell. The young man then takes one of the spider fangs he had collected. He uses the fang to pierce the scorpion's shell with all his strength. The tip of the fang breaks but manages to create a crack in the monster's defense. The giant beast begins to writhe in pain from the unexpected attack. The young man keeps attacking the same spot to widen the crack. Finally, he manages to pierce the shell and create an opening. He then explains that those are the fangs they picked up on the way. The spider's poison has the effect of softening the scorpion's shell. Kyle understands why he went to the trouble of collecting those fangs. Suddenly, the giant monster's eyes glow with a red light. It attacks the weak spot on its own back with its stinger. At that moment, green magic circles appear and trap the monster. One of the men accompanying Scar appears and uses his technique. The attack creates a large energy barrier that traps the scorpion. The technique is called Demonic Barrier Array and holds the monster in place. The protagonist sees the opportunity and says that now is the time. He leaps toward the scorpion's stinger for a final attack. The young man dodges the poison and cuts off the stinger with a single strike. His technique creates two arcs of energy that finish the monster off for good. The protagonist finishes the monster with a precise attack to its back. He remembers his sister's technique and decides to try something new. Channeling his unique power, he calls it the Holy Demonic Style. Then he calls out the name of the new technique, the Sword Dance of Light and Shadow. With that, the young man unleashes a series of rapid strikes on the giant monster. He then dives with his sword, aiming at the weak spot he created. The attack pierces the beast's shell, which explodes into a green liquid. The guards are shocked and comment on their master's true strength. The protagonist thinks he tried to recreate the technique, but still has a long way to go. His instructor congratulates him, and the young man tells him to handle the cleanup. The young man walks away saying he needs to resolve a personal matter. He then walks alone into a denser part of the forest. The hero thinks that in this era, the cause of the miasma pools is still unknown. But he knows the truth that it is a magical tool gathering the miasma. He then approaches a giant tree that gives off a strange aura. With his sword in hand, he prepares to cut the tree's bark. Inside the hollow trunk, he finds a magically glowing ring. With a satisfied smile, the black-haired young man says he finally found it. Suddenly, he hears a strange long sound coming from somewhere. The protagonist turns around, surprised, and wonders what that was. He quickly steps away from the giant tree and goes back to where the group was. The young man is shocked to see that the children are surrounded by a blue mist. One of the guards runs to him desperately, saying something happened with the monsters. The black-haired young man gets ready to fight with a serious look on his face. A horde of monsters with red eyes emerges and surrounds the group. Several beasts charge, and Kyle and his men try to protect the children. The protagonist faces the threat, and his sword glows with intense power. In the midst of the chaos, his instructor desperately yells his name. Kyle manages to block a monster's attack, and one of his men thanks him. The young man then yells for them to keep buying time for him. He looks at one of the children and notices a strange necklace around their neck. It is a demonic absorption item that steals and uses the opponent's mana. The instructor yells that they can't hold out much longer. The protagonist decides to interfere with the tool to find who is controlling it. The ring he found floats in the air, glowing with his combined energy. With this, the young man closes his eyes and focuses on tracking the enemy. He finds a masked figure and, with a confident smile, says he found him. The young man yells for everyone to look after the children and charges at the monsters. With a single strike, he defeats several orcs and wolves standing in the way. Then he runs into the depths of the forest surrounded by his aura. The young man runs quickly through the forest, following the trail of the enemy he found. Stopping in a clearing, he shouts that he knows someone is there and orders them to show themselves. At that moment, a masked man leaps from the trees and attacks him with his sword. But the protagonist easily blocks the strike, and their two blades clash with force. The enemy steps back and observes the black-haired young man with a curious look. He is surprised that the young man noticed his presence and calls him a member of the Dasker family. The hero then asks who gave the order, but the masked man refuses to answer. With a confident smile, the protagonist says he will make him want to talk. The two advance again, and their swords cross in a fierce battle. The opponent questions if the power he is using comes from his demonic core. The black-haired young man replies that not even he completely understands what it is. The enemy gets ready to use a special technique to end the fight. A dark red energy begins to emanate from his body as he focuses. The sinister aura manifests as shadows moving around him. He then launches his attack, creating several flying blades of pure dark energy. The red blades advance rapidly toward the protagonist. The young man faces the attack with a serious expression and prepares to defend himself. He manages to block one of the blades with his sword, but the pressure is heavy. Taking a hit, he uses his appraisal skill to analyze the enemy. The opponent's name is Darius, and the hero mocks him, asking where his confidence went. He notes that the man's swordsmanship is weak and decides he needs to close the distance. With that, the protagonist charges with speed through the blade attack. He dodges and deflects the red energies coming his way. Using the power of his core, he propels his feet to gain more speed. The young man moves agilely between the blades, getting closer and closer to the opponent. His charge surprises the masked man, who is not expecting this reaction. The young man then prepares a powerful strike to attack his enemy up close. The opponent thinks the attack is too obvious and says it will be easy to deal with. One of the red energy blades goes whizzing through the air. Darius then commands all his blades to surround and attack the protagonist. Seeing this, the black-haired young man decides to use one of his own techniques. His purple and golden aura shines intensely as he prepares his counterattack. He unleashes a powerful wave of energy that destroys the enemy's blades. The masked man is shocked to recognize the technique he used. Even surprised, the opponent prepares to continue the fight and charges forward. But the protagonist calls him slow and easily dodges his attack. With a quick movement, he strikes the enemy, who is badly hurt by the impact. Defeated, the masked man falls to the ground and drops his sword. He then asks how the young man knows the technique he just used. The protagonist explains that his core has both sacred and demonic powers. He explains that imitation is not the most important part of his unique power. The true value lies in creating techniques that can only be used with his core. With a confident smile, the young man says the enemy is going to tell him who gave the order. But the masked man refuses to give in and tells him not to think he has won. The opponent then takes a small vial and puts it in his mouth. The protagonist is surprised as he seems to know what that is. The enemy starts groaning in pain as a strange transformation takes place. His body begins to grow and change into a more monstrous form. The man's face contorts and his eyes glow with a red light. With a roar, he completes the transformation into a large green beast. The hero recognizes the power as a beastification technique and is shocked. The beast charges at the young man with impressive speed and strength. The black-haired young man readies himself for combat with his glowing aura. The clash between the two creates a massive shockwave that spreads out. He realizes that the monster's power and speed are on another level. The creature laughs and asks how long the protagonist will hold out. The monster keeps attacking with overwhelming fury and power. Its red eyes shine as it prepares for a new strike. With its sharp claws, the beast tries to tear at the young man, who defends himself. He manages to block the attack but is pushed back by the force. The creature gives no quarter and keeps pressing its opponent relentlessly. The monster strikes the ground with a powerful blow, and the young man barely dodges it. While in the air, the hero knows the situation is not good at all. He lands a jolly and thinks he cannot just keep dodging. The protagonist then decides he needs to create an opportunity to attack. He grips his sword firmly and focuses on his next move. The beast roars and wonders if the young man has finally given up given the power gap. Then the monster charges to end the fight once and for all. The young man reaches out his hand and prepares to use one of his trump cards. The ring on his finger begins to glow with an intense purple light. A pink energy barrier appears and blocks the creature's attack. The monster is thrown back by the force of the barrier that protected him. With a smile, he says he can recreate the techniques from his past life. The black-haired young man leaps into the air, his aura shining intensely. The beast is vulnerable in the air while the protagonist moves in for the strike. He prepares to use his holy demonic style to take down the enemy. A powerful golden light gathers on his sword for the final attack. The hero unleashes a beam of energy that hits the creature dead on. A massive explosion of light and power occurs upon the strike's impact. After the smoke clears, the protagonist breathes a sigh of relief for being saved. That is the ring of absolute repulsion, which nullifies an attack and releases a shockwave. With the fight over, the young man decides it is time to go back to Kyle and the others. Meanwhile, the instructor and his men fight desperately against a horde of monsters. Kyle feels he is reaching his limit and won't be able to hold out much longer. A giant orc approaches to deliver the final blow, and the man has no way to defend himself. With no strength left to continue, the instructor yells in frustration, waiting for the end. Suddenly, the monster's club stops in midair, and the guard is left completely confused. The orc attacking him simply falls to the ground right in front of him, completely defeated. The other monsters are also taken down, and the guards wonder how they survived. At that moment, the protagonist appears and asks if everyone is okay. His instructor replies that they are, and that somehow they managed to make it. The young man then points to the children and says he took care of the one responsible for the attack. He confirms it was a caster, but he doesn't know who hired him. With the danger gone, the children now sleep peacefully on the forest floor. The black-haired young man watches them with a serious and thoughtful look on his face. Back at the mansion, the protagonist walks determinedly toward one of the buildings. He thinks that innocent children almost lost their lives because of him and promises to retaliate. His maid then suggests he look for his sister Eve, an information broker. With that, the young man decides his first step is to find a clue with her. But as he approaches the building, a voice orders him to stop immediately. A blonde young man appears and says that even being family, he cannot enter there. The two then face each other in the courtyard with a growing tension in the air. In his thoughts, the protagonist remembers who his sister Eve is. The maid had told him that if anyone knew anything, it was the information broker. With his glowing aura, the black-haired young man tells his brother C's to move out of the way. The blonde young man reveals he's Eve's bodyguard and won't let him pass. C's yells that he cannot trust someone with so much desire for revenge. The protagonist understands the situation and prepares for what comes next. With a determined look, he says he's going to force his way through and draws his sword. The bodyguard sighs and says he has no choice but to fight. Wasting no time, the blonde young man charges with everything to attack his brother. Their two swords clash, creating a massive amount of sparks. The hero manages to block the strike with his blade and holds the pressure of the attack. The impact of the collision between the two powers creates a small shockwave. They step back for a moment and get ready for the next move. The bodyguard then releases red energy from his hand and prepares a technique. With a shout, he uses the stone spear, and the ground begins to shake and crack. Several stone spears emerge from the ground, and the protagonist is surprised by the attack. Even so, he moves agilely to dodge the sharp rocks. The young man uses his sword to destroy the spears coming his way. The bodyguard then uses his stone blade and creates a crushing fang. The protagonist is surprised to see a sword made of stone rising from the ground. With a determined look, the blonde young man advances to attack with his new weapon. The hero manages to block the strike, and the clash of the blades creates an energy wave. The two exchange a series of fast and powerful blows in the middle of the courtyard. The older brother faces his opponent with a serious and focused expression. Agilely, he attacks with two curved swords, and the young man defends himself as best he can. He thinks it is dangerous to get close and uses his appraisal skill. The status window shows that C's is a formidable high-level opponent. The young man notes that his demonic core is weak, which is why he uses several techniques. Because of this, he decides to settle the fight with pure brute force using his style. He then gets ready to use the sword dance of light and shadow. The protagonist unleashes a powerful wave of purple energy toward his brother. The blonde young man is shocked to see the power of Noah's demonic core. He is pushed back by the force of the attack and slides across the courtyard floor. But the bodyguard recovers and prepares the second form of his style. With a yell, he unleashes an instantaneous black lightning bolt with his dagger. The protagonist recognizes the technique as the shadow lightning style. He remembers his instructor teaching him about his family's techniques. That is an unavoidable strike specialized in speed, and the young man praises it. The blonde young man smiles and says that knowledge and combat are different things. With a shout, the hero prepares for the clash between the two attacks. The bodyguard releases his technique with a serious and concentrated expression. His attack's red energy spreads across the ground like lightning. The technique quickly advances toward the protagonist, who prepares his counterattack. With a battle cry, the young man unleashes the full power of his own technique. The two energies collide, creating an impressive scene in the mansion's courtyard. A gigantic explosion of light happens upon the impact of the two powers. The dust from the explosion spreads across the area, obscuring the view. When the smoke clears, the protagonist is still standing and ready to continue, but the enemy's red energy is still on his body and causes damage. He groans in pain and realizes his brother's attack is powerful. The young man thinks that not even his technique could completely block the strike. He then understands that the techniques he copies have their limits and are inferior. With this, he decides he needs to develop his own technique, but he doesn't know how. Suddenly, the blonde young man tells them to stop, as it was already enough. His sister Eve appears at the door and watches the two with a serious expression. Already inside the room, the girl asks what the reason for that fight between them was. The bodyguard explains that the young man came with the intention of eliminating someone on his face. The protagonist then questions why someone from the Dasker family would need a bodyguard. The girl with purple hair replies that she is not very good at fighting. Her brother questions her presence and says she is not in the succession fight. Eve then interrupts him and asks if he wants to know who hired the mercenaries. The protagonist is surprised and wonders how she knows that. With a confident smile, she replies that there are very few things she doesn't know. The girl says she would love to tell her cute little brother, but there is one condition. He understands it is a trade and asks what she wants in exchange for the information. Then his sister asks him if he knows the infinite library, and he gets startled. That is a gigantic labyrinth whose complete structure is still unknown. Adventurers and scholars formed a city around it, but the inside is dangerous. She then asks him to bring her the Book of Eternal Depths. The young man remembers the book that revolutionized magical theory in his past life. That theory saved many lives during the war against the terrible invaders. He thinks that if he can get the book earlier this time, he might be able to change the future. With a determined look, the young man accepts the proposal and promises to bring the book. The two then shake hands to seal the deal they just made. Sometime later, a carriage sets off toward the city of the library. Inside the carriage are the protagonist and his two loyal maids. The group then arrives at their destination, the great city of Arcanum. They walk through the stone streets of the city that was built around the library. They say the library is so complex that whoever enters never leaves. To find the book, he will need a guide and enters a building. The young man then walks down a narrow alley looking for information. He arrives at a large adventurer's guild to find his guide. Back at the mansion, Eve relaxes in her living room while drinking a cup of tea. Suddenly, a butler appears and announces that she has an unexpected visitor. A man with pink hair and elegant clothes enters the room with a smile. That is her brother Scar, who says he has something to ask about No. The girl stares at him with a serious expression while holding her teacup. She comments that it is rare to see him around there and wonders what he wants. The man with pink hair says he came to ask for his sister's help. He then asks for C's, and the girl replies that he left on a mission. With an evil smile, Scar realizes that his sister is unprotected at the moment. But she says she has capable subordinates and will be fine on her own. He praises her and asks what kind of information she wants about their brother. Scar talks about the power the young man showed when he fought Julia. The man with pink hair reveals he wants to know the secret behind that power. She is surprised he knows so much, and he says No defeated his attackers. The girl then places her cup on the table and says unfortunately she cannot help. She stares at him with a serious look and refuses to share any information. The girl with purple hair explains that she cannot say anything that would affect the succession fight. She thinks that if she sides with someone, the other siblings will come after her. Annoyed by the answer, the man with pink hair asks if she is refusing to cooperate. Eve then asks him if he can offer compensation that makes the risk worthwhile. With an evil smile, Scar mocks the word compensation and prepares a threat. He says she will understand soon, and a sinister shadow appears behind the girl. Meanwhile, in the city of Arcanum, the protagonist continues his search for a guide. The black-haired young man walks through the busy streets of the library city. He then heads to a specific building that looks like an old shop. The young man peeks through the window and seems to recognize the place he found. Upon entering the shop, he feels nostalgic and looks at the shelves. The shop owner, named Azrek, says the place is unfortunately closed. But the protagonist says he didn't come to buy anything and wants him to be his guide. The man refuses, saying he no longer accepts the kind of work. Ozrek laughs at the idea of being the best guide in the city and tells him to leave. The hero finds this strange as he remembers that man used to love the library. He then asks why Ozrek stopped taking jobs as a guide. The shop owner gets annoyed and says it is not a problem he can solve. With a tense expression, the man falls silent and stares at the counter. He then apologizes and says he has been very on edge lately. Suddenly, the bell on the shop door rings, announcing someone's arrival. A new person enters, and the protagonist is shocked to see his sister Julia. The silver-haired girl greets him with a confident smile on her face. She explains that she saw him during a mission and ended up following him there. Ozrek panics upon hearing the name and asks if she is Julia Daskor. The girl ignores him, and the protagonist formally introduces himself to the shop owner. With this, Ozrek changes his mind and says he accepts the job on one condition. The black-haired young man gets suspicious and realizes there is a reason behind it. The shop owner then asks the two to follow him to the back. He takes them to a room where a woman is lying unconscious in a bed. Ozrek explains that a month ago his wife was cursed by a monster. The creature that attacked her came from the dangerous labyrinth of the infinite library. The curse placed her in a deep sleep that will eventually lead to her end. The young man says that to break the curse, they need to defeat the monster. The man then asks for the help of the famous Julia Daskor to save his wife. The silver-haired girl accepts but says her brother will also participate. She looks at him, says that seeing how he fights is her condition for accepting the request. The protagonist thinks that she is obviously doubting his strength. He then turns to Ozrek and says he is counting on him as their guide. With a determined look, the shop owner replies that they can leave it to him. In front of the tower, the young man asks if she can come in the middle of another mission, but his sister says it is fine. The silver-haired girl then reveals that more important than that is knowing his secret. She remembers the fight and how she felt that something besides the demonic core blocked her power. With that, the young woman challenges him to show his secret in the labyrinth, and the young man thinks she noticed the difference. At that moment, Osric arrives saying he was waiting for them, and that the group is ready to go. With everything prepared, the trio and their companions walk toward the Great Library Tower. They enter the building and come across several other adventurers preparing for their missions. The guide then approaches the counter and says he will count on the two siblings' help. Some adventurers recognize Osric and comment that the Dasker siblings are his next victims. Standing before a huge door, the guide says that is the entrance to the Infinite Library. He then places his hands on the door, which begins to glow with an intense blue light. The large door opens slowly, revealing the vast and impressive interior of the library. The trio stares at the place, amazed by the immensity of the bookshelves and corridors. The protagonist comments that the place is truly vast and full of knowledge. His sister agrees and says she understands why a guide is necessary in that labyrinth. The stairs and corridors spread out in all directions, creating a confusing scene. Suddenly, the black-haired young man is surprised by something he sees on one of the walls. He notices a mural on the wall and is shocked to see the invaders from his past life. The young man thinks he didn't notice this before and that there is something there connected to the future enemies. Because of this, he believes he might find a clue to defeat them once and for all. With a slight smile, the hero says they can continue with the mission. He then reaffirms that their goal is to find the Book of Eternal Depths. They are on the first floor, and the young man asks the guide where the book might be. The guide explains that the book is forbidden and should be around the 20th floor. That is the lowest floor anyone has ever managed to reach in that dangerous labyrinth. The group then approaches a large magic circle on the floor to go down a floor. They walk down the corridor toward the portal that will take them to the next level. Suddenly, monsters emerge from the magic circle ready to attack the group. The guide asks if the siblings can handle the monsters, and the protagonist agrees. Wasting no time, the black-haired young man draws his sword and gets ready for the fight. With a quick movement, he delivers a powerful strike that cuts the monsters in half. The young man sheathes his sword with style after easily defeating the enemies. The orcs' bodies fall to the floor as the protagonist casually stands up. Impressed by his strength, the guide and his sister tell them to hurry up. They reach the 10th floor, and the guide asks them to keep what they see next a secret. The man then fiddles with one of the shelves and reveals a secret passage. Behind the bookcase is a dark corridor that leads to an unknown part of the floor. The guide takes them to a messy room with a shortcut to the lower floors. The trio stares at the magic circle on the floor, which glows with an intense blue light. They then enter the portal and are transported to an even deeper floor. The group is enveloped by an intense light as they are transported to the next floor. The protagonist observes the new environment with a serious and thoughtful look on his face. His sister asks where they are, and the guide answers that they are right before the 20th floor. With a confident smile, the silver-haired girl says the next monsters are right there. The trio then walks toward a large magic circle on the corridor floor. They approach the portal that will take them to the next area of the labyrinth. Suddenly, giant dark roots emerge from the ground, surrounding the group. A monstrous tree with several red eyes appears and glares at them furiously. The guide is terrified and says that is an ancient treant, much stronger than expected. He yells that they have no chance, but the protagonist's sister doesn't care. With a mocking smile, the girl asks if he really thinks it is just the two of them. She then says she is more than enough to handle the monster alone. Wasting no time, the young woman charges with impressive speed to attack. The creature attacks with its sharp branches, trying to pierce the silver-haired girl. She dodges the attacks with agility and cuts the branches with her sword. The girl leaps between the attacks and gets closer and closer to the main body. With a quick motion, she uses her wings to fly toward the creature's eye. The young woman then delivers a powerful strike right into the center of the monster's eye. Even with the attack, she realizes that the creature is quite resilient. The guide yells that its branches and trunk are as hard as steel and that they need a mage. Suddenly, the girl is caught by the creature's branches, which hold her tight. She is immobilized while the monster tightens its branches around her body. The creature prepares to crush her with its giant wooden hands. The protagonist yells his sister's name, desperate about the situation. But the monster stops its attack, and a red light begins to emit from inside its branches. The silver-haired girl unleashes her power using the 5th form of her style. A dark flame armor appears on her body and protects her from the grip. The black-haired young man is shocked and wonders if that is an armor of fire. With her new armor, she gets ready to use the 1st form of her style. The girl then unleashes the dark flame sword dance with her blade. The monster roars in pain as the girl frees herself and advances to counterattack. She moves with incredible speed, leaving a trail of red flames. Her strikes cut through the monster's branches with impressive ease. Agilely, she gets close to the main trunk for the final blow. The young woman then lets out a battle cry and unleashes the full power of her technique. A wave of red and dark flames advances toward the creature. The attack hits the monster's trunk dead on, creating a large wound. She then says her sword isn't stopped by something as hard as steel and glares at it. But the guide yells that it still isn't over and points to something on the ground. One of the creature's branches wraps around the girl's ankle and traps her. More branches emerge from the ground and coil around the silver-haired girl's body. She comments that the monster regenerates unless it is completely burned. The creature then pulls her toward its body and engulfs her with its branches. The protagonist recognizes the technique and says his sister is going to use the third form. Wasting no time, the black-haired young man grabs the guide's arm tightly. He then pulls Uzrek away and yells for him to hurry and get out of there. The girl's eyes glow with a red light as she prepares an attack. She unleashes an explosion of dark flames that completely consumes the monster. The shockwave from the explosion spreads and hits the two young men. They are thrown to the ground by the force of the attack while the smoke clears. The guide wonders if her intention is to burn everything to ashes. Amidst the flames, the silver-haired girl walks toward them. With a confident smile, she asks if they can move forward. The guide and the protagonist are shocked that she defeated the monster by herself. That fighting style is the most specialized in attack power on the continent. With the path clear, the trio continues their journey through the library corridors. They finally arrive at their destination, the 20th floor of the dangerous labyrinth. The protagonist and the guide begin looking for the book on the shelves. Suddenly, the black-haired young man spots the book he was looking for so much. With a shout of joy, he grabs it and confirms that it is the book his sister asked for. With the first part of the mission complete, they now need to find the monster. The guide says monsters usually don't appear outside the floor's plaza. With that, they start searching for the monster in the surrounding area of the floor. On one of the shelves, the protagonist finds a strange book on a pedestal. He picks it up and begins to feel a strange presence coming from the object. With a satisfied smile, the young man whispers that he finally found what he was looking for. Suddenly, the book starts turning its own pages and glowing. The black-haired young man feels a headache and seems confused by what is happening. The trio senses an evil presence and prepares for an unexpected combat. An armored monster emerges from the shadows and glares at them with its red eyes. The guide yells that that is the one who cursed his wife. With a determined look, the protagonist says they are going to wipe out the monster, but his sister tells him to fall back and prepares to fight the new enemy. With a sinister red aura, she says she will take care of the monster alone. The girl charges with everything she has, and her sword clashes with the armored enemies. She then launches a powerful wave of red energy toward the monster. Her technique cuts through the air and advances with impressive speed. Her sword creates a massive impact on the floor, kicking up a cloud of dust. Even with the attack, the silver-haired girl admits she was pushed back. She realizes a prolonged battle is dangerous and needs to end this quickly. The silver-haired girl's attacks clash with the armored monster's defense. She delivers a series of fast and powerful strikes, but the enemy manages to defend itself. The clash between the two swords creates an impressive scene full of sparks and energy. The force of the power collision spreads throughout the library hall. The protagonist is shocked that the monster blocked his sister's attack. The silver-haired girl keeps pressing her attack with everything she has. She moves with incredible speed and delivers a powerful downward strike. The young woman then gets ready to use the second form of her fighting style. She creates a vortex of dark flames that advances toward the enemy. The guide and the protagonist hide to avoid being hit by the powerful technique. The armored monster counterattacks with a powerful blow from its own sword. The clash between the two powers creates a massive explosion of light and energy. With a battle cry, the girl manages to find an opening and attacks. Her technique hits the monster's chest dead on, creating a huge impact. But suddenly the enemy surprises her with a quick counterattack and hits her. The young woman is thrown back by the blow, and her red aura dissipates. She groans in pain and realizes the monster is stronger than she expected. The protagonist is shocked that not even her destructive power worked. The silver-haired girl stands up with difficulty and faces the injured enemy. Suddenly, the armored monster prepares to launch a beam from its mouth. The young woman realizes her arm is injured, and she won't be able to defend herself. The green energy beam rapidly advances toward her. But the protagonist pushes her aside and narrowly saves her from the attack. The monster's attack opens a large crater in the library floor. He then says he is going to help, and the girl asks if he can fight that monster. The young man warns her to watch out for the enemy's hand, which causes curses. The young woman says she can't gather enough power to defeat it with her injured arm. The protagonist then steps closer and says he has a request for his sister. He refers to the attack the monster used to injure her earlier. The young man asks her to use that attack one more time, and the girl is confused. With a confident smile, the young man tells her to leave it to him and to cut off the monster's hand. The two siblings then charge together for a combined and powerful attack. The girl uses her flame sword dance, and the protagonist uses his own version. The two attacks clash with the monster, creating an impressive scene. A massive explosion of red and golden light happens upon impact. The clash between the three energies creates an even bigger explosion than the last one. The siblings then step away from the monster, their auras shining intensely. Amidst the smoke from the explosion, the protagonist and his sister prepare for the next step. The armored monster roars in pain as it is consumed by the explosion. The silver-haired girl glares at it and thinks that this monster is truly powerful. The two siblings prepare for a new attack while the monster recovers. The silver-haired girl leaps to attack the enemy with her flaming sword. The monster counterattacks with a powerful strike, and the two clash in the air. The protagonist tries to absorb the enemy's attack with his own energy, but the force is too great, and he yells for his sister to dodge the blow. The young woman then unleashes the second form of her style with a flame vortex. Her technique clashes with the monster's attack and creates a massive explosion. The enemy takes advantage of the smoke and prepares a new green energy beam. The girl yells her brother's name, worried about the surprise attack. The protagonist then unleashes his own power with the dual polarity blade. His sword glows with an intense golden light as he prepares his attack. The black-haired young man is surrounded by a powerful aura and attacks the monster. His technique hits the floor, and the young man pants from the effort he made. Next, he drives his sword into the monster's chest with all his strength. The armored creature roars in pain as it is struck by the sacred blade. The protagonist says the situation is bad and that he is at his limit. Suddenly, the silver-haired girl uses her vortex technique again. She helps him get rid of the monster and says the debt between them is paid. The young man realizes that not even her most powerful technique had an effect. With his sister exhausted, he wonders if retreating is their only option. Suddenly, the armored monster stands up and glares at both of them furiously. The protagonist and his sister are shocked to see that there are two monsters now. A mysterious voice then comments that the technique they used was clumsy. The black-haired young man stands still and wonders where that voice came from. A golden light appears and says his power is unbalanced and mixed. The young man asks who is there and where he is at that moment. The voice reveals itself as the successor of the Divine Core and congratulates him on awakening. It then tells him to end the fight once and for all and reveals the name of the technique. His sister shouts his name, worried about his strange state. A system window pops up and confirms the awakening of the Divine Core successor. The protagonist then readies the second form of his divine style. A powerful golden aura envelopes his sword as he concentrates. With his eyes glowing, he unleashes the double celestial rift technique. A powerful beam of golden light advances toward the two monsters. The technique hits them dead on and throws them back with incredible force. The young man then understands that this is the true power of his core. He says he is going to return the favor twofold and prepares for the next attack. The monsters are surrounded by golden energy and have no way to escape. A system window pops up and shows that the invitation was accepted by the enemy. With a surprised expression, the protagonist sees his sword glow with an orange light. The young man realizes he managed to inherit the Divine Core and its power. He is then transported to a strange place where he finds a golden figure. A man with blonde hair and a golden aura stares at him with a serious look. The protagonist asks who he is, and the man introduces himself as Zex, the previous heir. The black-haired young man asks about his power, and the ancient heir calls him a defective product. He explains that in the Age of the Gods, the invaders were fought with the Divine Core, but humanity was defeated because of internal conflicts among them. Other factions feared the power of the Divine Core and eliminated its bearers. To prevent its rebirth, the power was split into the demonic and sacred cores. The young man understands that the two powers were originally one, and that is why he inherited it. He then asks if they could have defeated the invaders if they hadn't been betrayed. With a confident look, the ancient heir replies that yes, they would have wiped out everyone. The protagonist thinks that with this power, he might be able to change the future. But the ancient heir warns him that he needs to strengthen his core by defeating enemies. With a determined smile, the black-haired young man accepts the challenge. The golden figure then tells him to start with the garbage in front of him. With a new power, the protagonist releases a golden and purple aura from his body. He advances with his blades of light toward one of the armored monsters. The enemy tries to defend itself but is hit dead on by the powerful attack. The young man promises he is going to destroy the monster's arm once and for all. His attack hits perfectly and destroys the enemy's cursed arm. The monster's hand grabs one of the light blades and tries to absorb its power. The technique used controls 6 blades of light that can be swords or shields. He uses the blades to attack and defend at the same time with great skill. The guide is impressed that he managed to destroy the monster's arm with light. The golden blades dance around the young man as he attacks the enemy. With a precise motion, he pierces the monster's chest with one of his blades. The protagonist smiles and says it looks like the tables have turned in his favor. He keeps attacking with his light blades, giving the enemy no chance. The monster roars in pain as it is hit by several consecutive strikes. With a final attack, the black-haired young man defeats the first monster. He then gets ready to attack the second monster, which is still standing. Suddenly, he hears a strange sound and looks back startled. The monster he just defeated regenerates and prepares an energy beam. His sister yells for him to dodge, but the young man has no time to react. The green beam rapidly advances toward him while he is vulnerable. But the protagonist uses his light blades to create a shield and defend himself. The clash between the two energies creates a massive explosion of light. The enemy's technique is powerful and consumes the young man's light blades. The armored monster completely regenerates and glares furiously at the protagonist. The protagonist stands up with his light blades and faces the regenerated monster. His sister is shocked that he came out completely unharmed from the enemy attack. With a confident smile, the young man says it is now 2 against 1. He then charges with his sword of light and delivers a powerful blow to the monster. The attack hits dead on and creates a massive explosion of golden energy. The armored monster is defeated and falls to the ground, completely beaten. A system window pops up and informs him that the Divine Core has leveled up. He receives a message from Zex congratulating him on the victory. The ancient heir says this is how the Divine Core grows and tells him to use the power well. The black-haired young man understands that getting stronger through battle means this. The guide approaches in shock and asks if he really defeated the monster. The silver-haired girl steps closer and confirms that the enemy is taken down. She then notices that the curse's effect has also disappeared from her body. With this, the curse on the guide's wife was also broken, and he gets emotional. The young woman steps closer and comments that he no longer looks like a 2-star. She asks him where he learned that technique, and the young man stays silent. The silver-haired girl then says there are several schools for the demonic core. The magic sword style, which is the base of all other techniques. The dark flame style, which specializes in powerful attacks. The dark lightning style, which focuses on speed and agility. And the abyssal style, which specializes in deception and tricks. But she says his technique does not belong to any of these schools and questions him. The two stare at each other with tension in the air, and the young man doesn't know what to answer. With a mysterious smile, the silver-haired girl says it doesn't matter. She then challenges him, saying she looks forward to the day they fight seriously. Back at the mansion, the protagonist and Kyle walk down the halls with the book. The black-haired young man enters a room and finds it completely trashed. Suddenly, his brother C's appears and says their sister Eve was taken away. The culprit is Scar, who invaded the room looking for information on Noel. He probably took her to force her to tell what she knows. The protagonist smiles and realizes Scar was behind the mercenaries. With a determined look, he says the situation is simple and they are going to save her. The young man mocks the idea of opposing Scar and says it will be a retaliation. With a serious look, he says that what starts now is a one-sided revenge. C's decides to go along to clean up his own mistake of not protecting his sister. Kyle tries to stop them, saying to wait for reinforcements, but they have no time. The black-haired young man says the family's swords don't break just because they are outnumbered. He then asks Kyle to protect the house while they are away. The bodyguard agrees and promises to protect the mansion with his life. With everything ready, the trio sets out to invade Scar's place and save Eve. The two brothers ride quickly towards Scar's Hedia. The black-haired young man wonders if his sister is okay, but C's reassures him. The protagonist comments that he trusts her a lot and asks why he became her bodyguard. The blonde young man explains that his demonic core is inferior to his other siblings. Because of this, he needed to refine his way of fighting and learn new skills. The hero understands why he couldn't predict his moves in their previous fight. The blonde young man says that to get stronger, he will protect his sister at all costs. They arrive at the mansion gates and dismount their horses for the invasion. The protagonist says that first they need to locate where his sister is. But he changes his mind and says there is no need to hold back. With a powerful kick, he bursts through the mansion gate with his aura. The impact of the kick breaks the gates, and the two advance into the courtyard. Suddenly, the protagonist turns around and blocks a surprise attack from a mercenary. A unit of Scar's shadow operatives appears and surrounds the two brothers. They charge together for the attack, but the blonde young man says they are skilled. The leader of the attackers mocks them, saying they were idiots to attack head-on. With his glowing aura, the protagonist says he has no business with small fry. The leader of the attackers thinks he doesn't understand the situation and looks at him with contempt. One of the mercenaries tries to attack the young man from behind, but he notices in time. With a quick movement, he blocks the strike and prepares for a counterattack. He then hits him with a powerful kick that throws him far away. The other attackers advance and say they will show no mercy to anyone who opposes Scar. The black-haired young man gets ready to fight against several enemies at the same time. He moves nimbly and manages to block a powerful blow from one of the attackers. The protagonist dodges and attacks with his sword in a dance of strikes and defenses. Meanwhile, his brother C's also fights against a group of mercenaries. He jumps into the air and delivers a powerful blow to the ground with his sword. The blonde young man then uses the third form of his lightning style. He releases a cutting flash of dark thunder that hits all the enemies. The blue shockwave spreads out and throws the attackers away. The enemies cry out in pain as they are electrocuted by the powerful technique. With a battle cry, the blonde young man challenges the attackers to come at him with everything they have. The protagonist watches him and thinks he can leave that side to him, but one of the attackers strikes at him, telling him not to get distracted during battle. The young man dodges the strike and takes a mysterious item from his pocket. He then throws the item on the ground, which creates a red magic circle. The protagonist wonders what that is and gets ready for what comes next. One of the attackers explains that this is a secret technique developed by them. The magic circle creates a barrier of flames that traps the black-haired young man. The leader of the attackers says that with that technique, not even he will be able to escape. The leader of the attackers leaps to attack the protagonist with his cursed sword. With his eyes glowing, the black-haired young man uses his appraisal skill. The enemy's name is Vault, and he is a formidable opponent with a secret technique. The young man then gets ready to use the second form of his divine style to counterattack. He holds his sword firmly and concentrates on releasing his power. The enemy's attack seals his demonic core, and he groans in pain from the effort. The leader of the attackers approaches and prepares to deliver the final blow. The protagonist realizes he cannot use his technique because of the seal. Vault tells him he cannot beat them with just his swordsmanship. The two brothers find themselves outnumbered inside the barrier of flames. The blonde young man recognizes the technique that seals the demonic core and worries. He then tells the protagonist to go on ahead while he holds off the enemies. C's tells him not to worry and to go defeat Scar and save their sister right away. The black-haired young man agrees and gets ready to push forward alone. He runs through the flame barrier, leaving his brother behind to fight. The attackers surround him, but the blonde young man is not intimidated by the disadvantage. He says that even with his core sealed, he can still use magic. With a quick movement, he creates a stone path and jumps away. The young man then yells for him to search the isolated residence for the most suspicious spot. The leader of the attackers says he won't let him pass and advances with his men, but the blonde young man creates a barrier of stone thorns that stops them. The leader of the attackers gets annoyed by the interference and glares at him furiously. The other attackers get caught in the thorns and cannot move. The blonde young man stares at him and asks if he shouldn't be fighting him instead. Meanwhile, Scar asks Eve about their younger brother's secret. The girl with purple hair refuses to answer no matter how many times he asks. The man with pink hair then reveals he captured several of her subordinates. The young woman calls him trash and says it is humiliating to have him as a brother. Suddenly, he hears a noise from outside and wonders what it is. Eve smiles and says his foolish little brother came straight into the trap. But the girl with purple hair says he still doesn't understand the situation. She provokes him, saying that sneaky methods don't suit the Dasker family. Scar gets angry and says he will finally see No's strength in person. With a scream of rage, the man with pink hair advances to attack his sister. But suddenly, the protagonist bursts through the window and enters the room. He says he came to rescue her and stares at his brother with a serious look. The young man then calls out to his sister and gets ready for the battle ahead. Scar is surprised by the sudden arrival and stares at him with an angry expression. The girl with purple hair watches him with a satisfied and proud smile. The black-haired young man prepares to fight his brother and save Eve. One of the attackers advances to attack the protagonist with his cursed sword. With his eyes shining intensely, the black-haired young man uses his skill. The status window shows that his opponent is Vault, a successor of a secret technique. The young man then gets ready to use the second form of his divine style. He holds his sword firmly and focuses on releasing his power. But the enemy's attack hits him, and he groans in pain from the technique's impact. The protagonist is thrown back by the force of the blow and distances himself from the enemy. He realizes he cannot use his technique since his demonic core was sealed. Vault mocks him, saying he cannot beat them with just his swordsmanship. The two brothers find themselves at a disadvantage inside the red flame barrier. The blonde young man recognizes the core sealing technique and calls it troublesome. He then tells the protagonist to go on ahead while he holds off the enemies. Cease tells him not to worry and to go defeat Scar and save their sister right away. The black-haired young man agrees and gets ready to advance toward the mansion alone. He runs through the flame barrier, leaving his brother behind to fight by himself. The attackers surround him, but the blonde young man is not intimidated by the disadvantage. He says that even with his core sealed, he can still use magic to fight. With a quick movement, he creates a stone path and jumps to the roof. The young man then yells for him to search the isolated residence for the most suspicious spot. The leader of the attackers says he won't let him pass and advances with his men. But the blonde young man creates a barrier of stone thorns that stops them. The leader of the attackers gets annoyed by the interference and glares at him furiously. The other attackers get caught in the thorns and cannot move. The blonde young man stares at him and asks if he shouldn't be fighting him instead. Meanwhile, Scar asks Eve about their younger brother's secret. The girl with purple hair refuses to answer, no matter how many times he asks. The man with pink hair then reveals he captured several of her subordinates. The young woman calls him trash and says it is humiliating to have him as a brother. Suddenly, he hears a noise from outside and wonders what it is. Eve smiles and says his foolish little brother came straight into the trap. But the girl with purple hair says he still doesn't understand the situation. She provokes him, saying that sneaky methods don't suit the Dasker family. Scar gets angry and says he will finally see No's strength in person. With a scream of rage, the man with pink hair advances to attack his sister. But suddenly, the protagonist bursts through the window and enters the room. He says he came to rescue her and stares at his brother with a serious look. The young man then calls out to his sister and gets ready for the battle ahead. Scar is surprised by the sudden arrival and stares at him with an angry expression. The girl with purple hair watches him with a satisfied and proud smile. The black-haired young man prepares to fight his brother and save Eve. The protagonist uses his blades of light to move quickly across the battlefield. He dodges the skeleton's attacks and advances towards Scar. The young man faces his brother and gets ready for the final confrontation between them. Scar yells and asks if he really thinks he can face an army alone. The protagonist advances and blocks his brother's strike with his sword. He then turns and dodges the attacks of the skeletons surrounding him. His blades of light spin around him and destroy the enemies with ease. The black-haired young man continues to fight against his brother's skeleton army. He yells that it doesn't matter how much trash his brother throws at him. With a quick movement, he unleashes a wave of golden energy from his sword. The skeletons are destroyed by the overwhelming power of his light blades. Scar is pushed back by the force of the attack and groans in pain from the impact. The protagonist looks at him with contempt and gets ready to continue the fight. The man with pink hair drives his sword into the ground and unleashes a new technique. The ground begins to crack and a large amount of purple energy spreads out. The young man is surprised to see a giant skeleton dragon emerging from the ground. Scar yells for the creature to tear his brother apart and glares at him with hatred. The skeleton dragon roars and advances toward the black-haired young man. With a confident smile, the protagonist says the situation is perfect for him. A system window pops up and shows his divine core at level 12. He then gets ready to use the 5th form of his divine style. His eyes glow with intense power, and he unleashes his new technique. The black-haired young man flies toward the dragon with a golden aura. He strikes the creature's eye with a precise and powerful blow. The protagonist floats in the air while the dragon roars in pain from the attack. His eyes and the dragon's glow with the same mysterious golden light. With this, the young man manages to control the creature's mind with his new ability. He lands on the dragon's head and faces his brother with a defiant look. Scar yells desperately and orders the creature to tear him apart once and for all. The protagonist explains that the beast is now his subordinate thanks to his power. Annoyed by the situation, the man with pink hair prepares to attack. He uses the 1st form of his abyssal style, the piercing fang of shadows. The attack advances toward the dragon but is easily blocked. Suddenly, the protagonist appears behind his brother and attacks him by surprise. He explains that the beast is now his subordinate thanks to his power. Annoyed by the situation, the man with pink hair prepares to attack. He uses the 1st form of his abyssal style, the piercing fang of shadows. The attack advances toward the dragon but is easily blocked and explodes. Suddenly, the protagonist appears behind his brother and attacks him by surprise. With a quick strike, he hits him and defeats him once and for all. Suddenly, the protagonist appears behind his brother and attacks him by surprise. With a quick strike, he hits him and defeats him once and for all. Defeated, the man with pink hair says he didn't want to have to resort to this. He then takes out a flute and begins to play a sinister melody. A large magic circle appears on the ground and glows with an intense blue light. 2 shadow operatives appear, holding his sister hostage in the middle of the courtyard. With an evil smile, Scar asks if he really came to save his sister. The protagonist gets angry and calls him a coward for using a hostage. The man with pink hair promises he will let her go after defeating his brother. With a dark aura, he advances to attack the black-haired young man. The young man grits his teeth in anger but cannot move so as not to risk her life. Suddenly, a massive wave of red energy appears and protects him from the attack. Scar is shocked and wonders what that technique is that appeared out of nowhere. Their older brother Damien appears in his armor and protects the girl. The protagonist is surprised to see his older brother there. The armored man says Eve had already declared she would not participate in the war. Angered by the interference, Scar yells that he doesn't care about the rules. Damien then says he will get rid of him for defying the family's laws. The man with pink hair is startled by his older brother's threat. With a furious look, the armored man says he will not tolerate his attitude. The two face each other with growing tension, and the protagonist watches the scene. Damien says that interfering in the battle for the core is also a violation of the rules. With this, he gives permission for the two of them to fight with everything they have. The protagonist says he can continue and gets ready for the final confrontation. With a mocking smile, he asks if his brother can't fight without hostages. Irritated by the provocation, Scar says everyone despises him and gets ready to attack. He then unleashes the 7th form of his abyssal style for the battle. A garment of shadows wraps around him and increases his power frighteningly. With a battle cry, the man with pink hair promises he will cut him down. The protagonist thinks that style specializes in confusing the opponent. He then gets ready to attack without giving his brother a chance to use his tricks. The two charge at each other and their swords clash with force. They exchange a series of fast and powerful strikes in the middle of the courtyard. The black-haired young man then unleashes his double celestial rift technique. The wave of golden energy advances towards Scar with overwhelming power. The protagonist is shocked to see that his brother managed to block his attack. The man with pink hair then uses the 4th form of his abyssal style. He unleashes an invisible slash that advances toward the black-haired young man. The protagonist is caught off guard and hit dead on by his brother's technique. With a quick strike, Scar manages to injure the young man and throws him back. The young man grits his teeth in pain as he tries to defend against his brother's attack. He thinks that is a powerful strike that cannot be defended against easily. Even injured, the protagonist manages to dodge the attack and jumps away. Scar yells and asks where he thinks he is going in the middle of the battle. The black-haired young man uses his light blades to defend against the attacks. He groans in pain from the effort but manages to avoid a critical injury. The man with pink hair is shocked that his brother managed to dodge. The protagonist prepares for a new attack with his sword in his hands. He uses his light blades to attack the enemy with everything he has. The two move around the courtyard in a dance of fast and powerful strikes. The young man thinks his brother's swordsmanship is cowardly but highly practical. He then asks him why he resorted to such low methods when he has so much strength. Scar replies that it is because their father never recognized him and despised him. Because of this, he created his own fighting style to utilize his talent. But even so, their father didn't look at him and completely ignored him. With a scream of rage, the man with pink hair says his only option is to win. He promises he will make their father recognize his power through the succession war. Scar gets ready to use the 9th form of his abyssal style. He creates a sphere of red, dark energy to attack his brother. The technique is called Destruction of the Dragon's Burial and has frightening power. The energy transforms into a large red dragon that advances to attack. The protagonist gets ready to defend himself from his brother's powerful attack. The energy dragon hits him dead on and creates a massive explosion on the spot. A sphere of golden light appears and protects the young man from the technique's impact. He manages to defend against the attack with his light blades and faces his brother. The black-haired young man is surprised that his demonic core has reached its limit. Suddenly, he feels a pain in his neck and remembers something important. Scar is shocked and wonders what that pill his brother took is. The protagonist reveals he solidified the poison he used to make him drink. He then eats the pill and a powerful golden aura envelopes his body. Scar yells that he has gone crazy because that medicine amplifies the demonic core. But the black-haired young man explains that for him, it becomes a powerful medicine. A system window pops up and shows that his divine core has leveled up to 20. The two face each other with fierce determination and prepare for the final blow. The protagonist unleashes the second form of his divine style with all his power. He creates a flash of light and darkness that advances toward his brother. Their two techniques clash and a massive explosion of energy happens. Scar is hit dead on by his brother's overwhelming power and is defeated. The explosion destroys part of the mansion, and the dust spreads throughout the area. With the fight over, the protagonist stands still in the middle of the destruction. The red energy dragon advances furiously to attack the black-haired young man. The protagonist counterattacks with his light blades, and the two powers clash. A massive explosion of red and golden energy occurs upon impact. The power of the explosion throws the two brothers far away with incredible force. The shockwave from the explosion spreads and creates a large crater in the courtyard. Amidst the smoke and dust, Scar's mansion is completely destroyed. Damien uses his shield to protect his sister from the debris of the explosion. A large cloud of smoke forms and an explosion happens in the distance. The older brother and Eve watch the scene, shocked by the power of that fight. The protagonist and his brother Scar stand still in the midst of the destruction. With a serious look, the black-haired young man says he doesn't want to take his life. He then points his sword at Scar and orders him to surrender. Defeated, the man with pink hair admits his loss and accepts the deal. He falls to his knees and says he will hand over his demonic core to the protagonist. But suddenly, the black-haired young man notices something wrong with his brother. With an evil smile, Scar strikes his own chest with a dagger to unlock a dark power. His eyes glow with a green light as he prepares for one last attack. The protagonist is shocked and doesn't understand what his brother is doing. Damien and Eve watch the scene terrified by Scar's desperate move. The man with pink hair yells that he would never surrender to someone like him. With a quick movement, he attacks the protagonist and hits him dead on. The black-haired young man groans in pain and falls to the ground, injured by the blow. His sister screams his name desperately when she sees him fall to the ground. The two run to help him, but the situation seems dire. Scar yells that this ends now and advances to deliver the final strike. But the protagonist stands up and manages to disable his brother's arm. Defeated and severely injured, the man with pink hair falls to the ground. He glares at his brother with hatred and refuses to accept defeat under any circumstances. The protagonist also falls to the ground, exhausted and injured from the long battle. He thinks that is the family's way of fighting, prioritizing pride. The two brothers fall to the ground at the same time after a fierce and intense battle. Even Damien runs to help the black-haired young man, who is badly hurt. The older brother says the injury is critical and that they don't have time. A green aura surrounds the purple-haired girl, and she begins to heal him. She uses the first form of her dark flower style to save him. The nebulous lantern technique shines brightly and heals the young man's injuries. The green flames wrap around his arm and close the deep cut he suffered. Slowly, the protagonist regains consciousness and his wounds heal. He sits up, and Eve says that even though she is not good at fighting, she can use her core. The black-haired young man thanks her for saving him and smiles at his sister. But he says the most important thing right now is his brother's demonic core. From Scar's body, a sphere of red energy floats toward the protagonist. The black-haired young man stares at the core and prepares to absorb it. He then reaches out and carefully grabs the energy sphere. A golden and purple aura envelopes his body as he absorbs the new power. A system window pops up and shows the evolution of his stats. His demonic core advances 3 classes, and he gains incredible power. Suddenly, his brother Caesar arrives and calls him to see what happened. Damien praises him, saying he never thought the youngest would defeat them. The blonde young man asks if Eve is okay, and she reassures him. He asks if his older brother helped her, and the armored man confirms it. The protagonist and his older brother exchange a serious, intense look. The 3 brothers gather amidst the destruction after a long battle. Damien comments that the battle was interesting and that the young man's power is mysterious. But he says the most important thing now is to resolve the situation with their father. A messenger appears and says Lord Victor has summoned him for a meeting. The black-haired young man then heads to his father's castle for the meeting. He enters the room and his father says he heard he took Scar's core. The man stares at him with a serious look and asks if that is true. The protagonist confirms and says he won the battle fairly. The patriarch then questions him about how strong his brother was. The young man replies that he surpassed him in every aspect of the fight. With that, his father asks why he thinks he managed to beat him. The black-haired young man remains silent for a moment before answering. He says it was because of his thirst for strength and that he loses to no one in that regard. The patriarch smiles with satisfaction and says that was a great answer. He then decides to give his son a reward for the victory. The young man says he doesn't need to hold back and asks him to name what he desires. The protagonist then asks to be sent to a certain place as his reward. His father asks if he has no greed since he could ask for weapons or gold. With a confident smile, the young man replies that what he will gain there is greater. The patriarch understands that everything comes down to his quest for strength and agrees. Sometime later, a carriage travels along a mountain road. Inside it are the protagonist and his two trusted maids. He then says he will leave the matters around him in their care. The two agree and say he can leave everything to them without worrying. Suddenly, one of the maids is surprised by something she sees out the window. She points outside and says they have finally arrived at their destination. The carriage approaches a large gate and stops in front of a mansion. They then get off and walk toward the entrance of the grand estate. He smiles and says they have finally reached the legendary city of dragons. The carriage approaches Draconia, the city built by the alliance of humans and dragons. Upon getting off the carriage, he is greeted by two guards who recognize him. The creatures introduce themselves as envoys of Draconia and offer their help. They then guide them down the road toward the great city of dragons. The protagonist observes them with a serious and thoughtful look on his face. He thanks them for their help, and the two dragonkin bow in respect. Suddenly, a group of ogres appears and surrounds them, yelling that they found them. The leader of the ogres advances with impressive speed to attack. The other monsters follow him, ready for the battle against the group. The dragonkin are shocked and wonder what the ogre clan is doing there. They then draw their swords and tell the protagonist to fall back for his safety. The young man thinks that this is a race fighting for control of the region. He remembers the stories about the war between the ogres and the dragonkin. With this, he understands that they want to interfere with the Dasker family's help. The protagonist then tells his maids to hide in the carriage. The leader of the ogres mocks them and says the dragonkin have fallen very low. He says he has no business with small fry and tells the young man to leave. With a confident smile, the black-haired young man stares at him with contempt. He then returns the words and says he will let him go if he leaves right now. Annoyed by the arrogance, the ogre leader promises he is going to overpower him. The giant monster advances with fury to attack the protagonist with everything he has. The young man readies himself for combat and unleashes his golden and purple aura. With a quick movement, he gets ready to block the enemy's punch. The protagonist manages to catch the monster's fist with his two hands. He then throws it up into the air and jumps to attack with his sword. The two clash in the air, and the impact creates a large crater on the ground. The black-haired young man steps back and gets ready for a new attack. He lets out a battle cry and prepares to use the first form of his style. The young man unleashes a flash of light and darkness that advances against the monster. The attack destroys the rock the enemy threw and hits it dead on. The ogre leader is surprised by the young man's power and speed. He advances again to attack with his powerful, anger-filled punch. The clash between the two creates a massive shockwave that spreads out. The protagonist thinks the monster's attack is based on pure brute force. He then hits it with a powerful blow and knocks it into the bottom of the crater. The ogre leader is shocked that he attacked head-on and calls him a fool. The creature then leaps into the air and gets ready for an attack from above. The monster comes down with its flaming fist to crush the young man against the ground. But the protagonist dodges nimbly and the enemy hits the ground hard. With a final blow, the protagonist strikes the ogre leader and defeats him. The monster takes a heavy hit and falls to the ground, completely defeated after a long battle. The black-haired young man then turns and challenges the other ogres to step up to the fight. They glare at him with hatred and get ready to attack all at once. The monsters roar and advance furiously to avenge the fall of their leader. The protagonist observes them with a serious look and prepares for combat. He then unleashes the second form of his divine style with all his power. The golden light blades advance and hit the ogres dead on. The monsters are thrown back by the force of the attack and fall to the ground. The dragonkin are shocked by the power of the Dasker family. His maids praise him, saying it was a magnificent performance. The young man scolds them for leaving the carriage, but they say it is their duty. He then turns to a dragon flying in the sky and orders it to come down. The creature approaches, and a man jumps off its back to the ground. The dragonkin lands with a massive impact and stares at the protagonist. He says he witnessed his power and introduces himself as a Delbolt. The young man asks him why he didn't join the fight to help. The commander replies that a king cannot be entrusted to a weakling. With a smile, the black-haired young man asks if he passed the test. The dragonkin confirms and says he will guide him into the presence of Lord Algarnos. The group then follows the commander through the streets of the city of Draconia. One of the maids is impressed to see humans and dragonkin living together. The other comments that a country where different races coexist is very rare. The commander says he should explore the city later, and they agree. Suddenly, a large green dragon flies over the group and watches them. They are taken to a dark cave and follow the commander with a lantern. Standing before a massive door, the group stares at the crest of a dragon. The commander announces that he has brought Master No Daskor for the meeting. A mysterious voice tells them to enter, and the crest's eyes glow. The large stone door opens slowly, revealing a dark room. The group enters the room, and an overwhelming pressure hits them. The protagonist thinks that this pressure is equal to or greater than his father's. The dragonkin drop to their knees as a sign of respect before the powerful presence. The young man and his maids feel the pressure and prepare for what comes next. They stare into the darkness and wonder what awaits them in that room. A voice then greets them and calls them young collaborators. A large white dragon with golden wings appears and looks at them with its bright eyes. The protagonist and his maids are shocked by the sight of the creature.